Alright, so I'm going to pick up part 2 of my Midwest and Kentucky crayfish video right here. I am in Western Kentucky and I am looking for the Crittenden crayfish here. And that is a species that is a narrow endemic to just a few Ohio River tributaries in Western Kentucky. And so here are the Crittenden crayfish. Super common at this spot. They just have a small distribution. But where they do occur, they can be really common. But I'm just gonna go ahead and let these go now. And move on to my next spot. Alright, so actually that last crayfish was the Livingston crayfish. I apologize, there was a mix-up in my notes. But this is the actual Crittenden crayfish. So it is another narrow endemic that's only found in a few Ohio tributaries and Western Kentucky. And here is the calico crayfish. These have a pretty wide distribution. They're really common in the northern states and even Canada. But they also range into the south a little bit in Kentucky. And this is a Form 1 male. And so this is what the gonopods of a Form 1 will look like. As you can see, they are cornified at the tip. All of their structure is there. They're not lumpy or ill-formed. This is what a Form 1 gonopod looks like. So this is the first Form 1 from this trip. And it's this calico crayfish. But I'm gonna go ahead and release him, and that'll be it for this spot. Alright, so I made a quick stop here at this creek, not for any stream-dwelling crayfish, but actually for burrowing crayfish. And so I dug a burrow down there, and I'll show you what I found. And this is what I was hoping to find here. This is the newly described Crawzilla Crawdad, and it is one of the largest species of devil crayfish. Here is my hand for scale. And so this is actually a Form 1 male. Let me see if I can get the gonopods out real quick so I can show you. And so there is what a Form 1 gonopod looks like. So that is awesome. Been tired of finding just Form 2 males on this trip. But I'm gonna go return it to the burrow where it came from, and then I'm gonna hit up another spot for other crayfish. So I'm at my next quick stop, and I came here for the Kentucky crayfish, the one on the right. And then I saw this Bigclaw Crayfish, the one to the left. But both species are very common at this creek. And they do look kind of similar, except the Bigclaw has that black spot at the base of the dactyl, and the Kentucky crayfish does not. You can also, these are both Form 2 males, but even with them being Form 2 males, you can still tell that they are different species by their gonopods. So the Kentucky crayfish will have really short terminal elements on its gonopods. So there is its gonopod out right there. And so even with it being a form 2 like this, you can still see that the terminal elements are very short on this crayfish. And as you can see, the terminal elements on this crayfish are much longer. And this is also a form 2. So even if they are form 2 males, you can still kind of tell them apart from somewhat similar species. It's only when you get into exact species groups where you'll need to look at the form 1 gonopods to tell those species apart. What's really unique about this Bigclaw crayfish is the rostrum. It's pretty deformed. So most crayfish will have 2 marginal spines on their rostrum, but this has an extra 3. This has 5 marginal spines on one rostrum. I guess it tried to grow like 2 or 3 rostrums. I'm not really sure what's going on here. But a pretty unusual defect. But I've already gotten photos of these 2, so I'm just going to go ahead and release them now. And here's a look at some of the habitat that they live in. So I have run into a problem. I barely have any storage left on my phone, which means that I need to take some time off to edit and upload those videos so that I can get them off my phone. But while I'm waiting to check into my hotel, I figured I might as well use the time productively and go to one spot to look for some crayfish. And I found 2 species here, and so here they are. And so first up is the rough river crayfish. This is a species that has a kinda somewhat small range. It is endemic to the state of Kentucky. And this is the crayfish that I came here to find. It's got those orange tipped chellae or claws. And so this is actually one of the species that has short gonopods, or short tip terminal elements, but this is just a form 2. And so this is the second species at this spot. This is another calico crayfish. And unlike one of the previous spots, I believe it was the Crittenden Crayfish spot, but those were the most common crayfish there, and only found like 2 calico crayfish. But it's the opposite here. The rough river crayfish is less common, and these are far more common. I also found a juvenile ambiguous crayfish, but I didn't bother with it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and let these go. And now it is time for me to check into my hotel and start knocking out these videos. Alright, so I've made another really quick stop at this creek. And so here I got some western highland crayfish. And all of these are females or form 2 males. So another species for the trip, and I'm gonna go ahead and let these go. Alright, so I'm at another quick stop, and this is a really cool spot. I mean, this place has it all. Like, there are riffles, long deep pools, aquatic vegetation, and tons of rocks. I could really see myself coming back here in the future. But this is a look at some of the habitat that I'm in. So I really like this spot. But anyways, let me get to the crayfish that I found here. All right, and so this is the crayfish that I came here to see. This is the Muddy River Crayfish. And I love the pattern on this crayfish. I mean, it looks pretty cool for a Faxonius. But this one is a Form 2 male, that is a Form 2 male, and then there's a female. But check out the gonopods on this male. They are really deformed. I don't know if it was just born like that or if that was a bad molt or what, but they're definitely funky looking, to say the least. And so here is a two-spot crayfish. It gets its name from the two spots at the front of their abdomen, right there and there. So, right, I mean, you can kind of see it, but it's right there and then on the other side. But that's where it gets its name from. It does look morphologically very similar to the ambiguous crayfish, but pattern-wise, sometimes you can tell them apart. When their abdomen has that lighter edge at the bottom of the pleurons, then it's pretty easy to tell the two apart pattern-wise. But that's not always the case, and it can be kind of tricky to tell them apart if these don't look like this. And so here are Cavespring Crayfish. I don't normally see these in creeks. Usually I find them in caves, but they can live in creeks too. This one is nice and spotted. But these are both younger individuals. These can get a lot bigger. All right, so that was the last of the crayfish, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to my next spot. Well, I am back in the Barren River watershed because last time I was here, I neglected to take photos of the crayfish I found. I told myself I would just come back the next day, but that was not the case. To save time, I just went ahead and went to my next spot in closer to Louisville, I believe. But I mean, I liked the spot, I just did not like the parking. Like, it was a long walk down to the river, and there was no shade to park in. But it was a really nice spot. I just did not feel like doing all of that again. But at that last spot, I found two-spot crayfish and ambiguous crayfish, which I didn't really find here. I mean, I'm sure they are here, and I could have turned some up if I had all day to look for them, or a couple of hours. But I've only been here like an hour, and I've turned up four species. The Barren River Crayfish and the Follic Crayfish I found today and at that last spot. But here are the crayfish. So say what? 3 Bottlebrush Crayfish? I mean, they're all juveniles. This one is a female, and both of these are males. But what is crazy is I found all 3 of these in a matter of like 1 or 2 minutes. I'm sure you've seen this from an earlier video, but these are really cool crayfish. They are currently only one of 2 species in the group. So it's really cool to turn these up again. And normally these are not an easy species to find. Usually a lot of time is needed to look for these, you could be spending hours and not find any. But I'm gonna go ahead and start returning these back to the rocks they came from. So and so like this is the rock that this one was from. Here's my boot for scale. I wear a size 14. I don't know if that's very helpful to a lot of y'all, but so here's this guy and the release. So they do prefer larger slab rocks, but in all honesty, you can find them under just about any size rock. Well, here is a fish that I am super happy about. This is the freckle belly darter. There's a larger one right here. But I'm sure you can guess how they get their name. But I was actually hoping to see these at another location, and I could not find any at all. And then I came here, and sure enough, they're here. So this was a very pleasant surprise. But I'm gonna go ahead and let these go and continue with the crayfish. And so right here is a depression crayfish. They get their name because they usually sit in the depressions that they live in under rocks. Once you lift the rock, they usually just sit there in that depression of theirs. But this one is soft to the touch, which means that he molted recently. And so I was kind of expecting blue legs, but I guess this is just not one of the blue-legged populations. Some populations of the species can have some really nice blue legs. But nope, this one is just brown and drab. But that's okay, buddy, I still like you. And next up is the Blood River Crayfish. These are endemic to the Green River watershed. They can be found in the Green and Barren rivers, but usually in the upper reaches. And they kind of have a characteristic pattern to them that only 2 other currently described species have. Other distinguishing features are the lack of cervical spines, although it looks like this one has some cervical tubercles. And a big way to tell them apart is by the gap in their claws. So this is what that gap in the claw looks like. And so lastly is the Follic Crayfish. You've probably seen this in an earlier video. And they get their name from their gonopods. Like, look how far up they reach. It's almost to the 1, 2, the 4th pair of legs. I mean, just about to the base of their claws. But this is what the gonopods look like. And as you can see, they have some really long terminal elements. Yep. They got the longest gonopods of any crayfish. But I'm gonna go ahead and let this guy go. Well, I wanted to find a larger bottlebrush crayfish, and turns out they actually are super common at this spot. I mean, I was just checking the rocks over here in this run, and that is all bedrock right there. But down there, there is a lot of rocks and a lot more bottlebrush crayfish. Mostly juveniles. But here is an adult. It's a Form 1 male, but it's still not as big as they get. They do get a lot bigger than this. But yeah, this is my hand for scale. And this big dude is a sweetheart. It hasn't once tried to pinch me. Those younger ones I can't say so much. Like, those younger ones though, they definitely pinched me. But sweet, it's good to know that they are common here. Well, it is getting dark, so I need to go ahead and get out of here. So here is one last look at this crayfish. And I'm just gonna go ahead and return it back under the slab rock that it was found under. But there you go, buddy. Maybe I'll see you again in the future. Well, I just got back to the car, but man, I'm still not over that. That was a big difference from finding no bottlebrush crayfish my first attempt, finding one where I was not expecting it, and then finding about a dozen in like 2 hours here. And I was only looking for them for maybe like 30 minutes max altogether, and I turned up over a dozen. Like, that was crazy. So yeah, that's gonna be some really good memories. But it is time for me to go find a place to sleep, and I'm gonna pick this back up in the morning. So I am now in the Red River subdrainage of the Cumberland watershed, and I found 3 species of crayfish at this creek. So let me introduce you to those. And so these are slender crayfish. They got some pretty cool white tip claws, and they are a small species. So here's my hand for scale. But I really like the white tip claws on these. They stand out really nicely. And these are gravel substrate specialists. But I'm going to go ahead and let these go and move on to the next crayfish. And so here are some more depression crayfish. And it looks like this is one of the blue-legged populations. And they even have some blue on their tail fan. But yeah, this one has the more darker blue legs. This one looks like it has molted recently. So this one looks cleaner, but the legs are not as blue. But this is a really cool species. Like, I did not have very high expectations of seeing any of these on this trip. But so far I've found 3 populations, and one of them I did not film. That was another blue leg variety, but they seem to be common here and at that first spot. But that Barren River watershed, I only found that one, but I didn't really look very hard for them either. But I'm going to go ahead and let these go now. But I mean, look at that in the water. It stands out so well. And the most common crayfish at this creek is, not surprisingly, the Bigclaw Crayfish. These can be very common. Usually wherever they are found, they are the most common species. But this will be the last crayfish from the spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and let him go now. All right, and I'm going to head on to the next spot now. So I have now moved to the southwesternmost tip of Kentucky. So I'm at this creek, and here I found two crayfish, the Blood River Crayfish and the Devil Crayfish, or one of the Devil Crayfish species. I don't think this one has been officially described yet. Or it has, but it just needs to be redescribed. Alright, and so here is the Blood River Crayfish. It is endemic to a county each in Kentucky and Tennessee. But, I mean, I really think the pattern is really cool. Those orange tip claws are so pale it almost looks white, which I haven't seen in a crayfish before. But two of these are formed to males and the other is a female. But I'm just going to go ahead and let these go now and move on to the Devil Crayfish. And so this is the Devil Crayfish. This is a female and it was found in the creek, but it doesn't have eggs or young yet. So it's probably about to lay eggs. But really cool species. These are really pretty. They have a lot of cool red accents. But I am going to let her go, and that'll be it for the spot. I'm going to try to make it to one other spot before it gets dark. Alright, so I am now in northwestern Tennessee, and I came here for the Crescent Crayfish. I just found 3 juveniles, so I guess I'll just have to take that. But this creek was really hard to sample for them. There wasn't a lot of undercut banks, but let me show you that crayfish and I'll wrap it up here. So here is the Crescent Crayfish. So that is another species for the trout. And this was described, I mean, not really recently, but it was kind of described recently within like it might have been described over 10 years ago, but it's still kind of a new species. I think it might have been described in 2008. Don't quote me on that though. But I'm gonna go ahead and let these go, and that'll be it. Alright, so that'll be it for the last part of my Kentucky crayfish video. Thank you so much for watching. And now I'm gonna be headed to Arkansas to look for a lot of crayfish. Gonna try to find as many burrowing species as I can, so hopefully it'll turn out well. I'll see you in the next video.